Well, welcome everyone. My name is Charlie Holt, and I am the host of today's webinar. And I have with me Alan White, who is author of the Exponential Groups Moving Beyond Your Limits. I have basically two goals for today, and the first goal is that I want to talk about a little bit about the vision of bringing the heart of the gospel back to the heart of the church. Christian Life Trilogy is a three-part small group series that is designed to be done at the heart of the church here during Lent, Easter season, and Pentecost, and it's aimed at renewing the church. And the methodology that we use with the Christian Life Trilogy is the use of small groups, doing small groups on the level of a church-wide campaign. And so the hope is for this webinar is that we would talk about what does it mean to recruit teams to help pull off a church-wide small group campaign, and that can be those principles that we're going to be talking about today can be used with any church-wide campaign. If it doesn't have to be the Christian Life Trilogy, but we would hope that you would have an interest in that and perhaps look at that as a possibility for your congregation. Alan, I want to ask you a question. How would you define a church-wide small group program? What does that look like, and what kind of scope would we be talking about when we're talking about having small groups on a church-wide level or basis?
Yeah, typically it would be a small group study that would be aligned with the weekend messages. And, of course, for churches that follow the liturgical calendar, something like the Christian Life Trilogy fits perfectly with the Lenten season, the Easter season, and then the Pentecost season. Other churches, popular campaigns have been things like 40 Days of Purpose with Rick Warren, which is where I met you, Charlie, and you had a ton of groups. And then 1 Month to Live with Carrie Shook, those sorts of things. But it's something where you kind of want to bring everybody onto the same page for a certain season. And so as much as possible, Sunday school classes, home groups, Bible study fellowships, try to get them aligned onto the same thing. Now, there may be a few things that are fairly entrenched that you may not want to fight that battle, and I don't blame you if you don't want to. But the crux of it is to give people an incentive to get together, to study God's Word, to hear biblical teaching, and then also to invite friends and family and relatives and coworkers, maybe people who are no longer active in the church, maybe people that are far from God, to come and to join them, at least in the living room, if not on Sunday morning as well.
What are some of those benefits that people can glean and congregations receive when they have a small groups as a widespread program?
Yeah, we've had a number of our churches that have seen, as people are connected with a small group that is doing a study based on the weekend, that you find that typically your weekend service participation is higher, and because they want to be involved in the whole thing. And we've even seen where people would join a small group, and then they would say, oh, by the way, our pastor's talking about this on the weekend if you'd like to join us. And so they would actually start attending church, but the introduction was through their friend's living room. One of the things you definitely have to have as you start all of this is to identify new leaders. Now, I know for pastors that are already busy and have an overchecked schedule, they just kind of groan. Hopefully they didn't sign off. But one of the things we found is just to ask people if they would be willing to gather their friends and do the study. And this is a little less risky than some of the other things we've tried, with the fact that if they gather their friends already know them. So if they're going to be a great leader, the friends know they're going to be a great leader. If they're going to be a total goofball, the friends know they're going to be a total goofball. But it does open up an avenue where it helps you to identify some folks that maybe you wouldn't have invited to do it. Because sometimes, the most unlikely people make some of the best leaders. What are some of the things that you've found, Charlie?
The last one on this list of increased spiritual growth, to me, is the most important, to see the transformation in people's lives. One of the things we're talking about today is the idea of building a team. And every church, whether we're talking about a church that's got 100 people coming on a weekend or 50 people coming on a weekend, or a church that has 1,000 people or 5,000 people, when we do ministry in teams, we actually get a lot more done. I'm wondering what you might think about some of the reasons why we need to build a team.
Yeah, I think first of all, any pastor is busy. Whether I've been on a church staff with, a pastor has 10 different associate pastors in various areas of ministry, and I've been on a church staff where I was the one and only associate pastor. And then, of course, there was a time that we had no senior pastor, and I was the guy. We were 85 people at the time. So everybody is busy, especially if you're in a smaller church. And so to take something on in addition to everything that you're doing can be very difficult. But the good thing about this is as you develop a team for a series like this, is that you maybe involve some people on a temporary basis, not on a permanent basis, but a temporary basis that would be willing to volunteer to be part of a project. The other thing is we begin to talk about the different roles we would look for a campaign team. We also begin to identify some new categories of serving. I think at one point, in a lot of churches, it's a matter of, well, if you don't sing and you don't want to work with the kids, then maybe you could be an usher. And that's not to take away from usher, but sometimes we're very limited in our categories of serving. And we can kind of expand that out into some other different types of areas and engage some people in leadership, but maybe they just haven't found the right thing up to this point.
That's really good. One of the things, Alan, people are having a little bit of hard time with the audio. And so what I'm doing is muting mine while you're talking, and if you can mute yourself while I talk, that seems to be working. One of the things that I have found as a senior pastor, in our tradition we call the senior pastor the rector of the church, which is, it is what it is as a title, but the senior pastor of the church is a very busy position, and you have a lot of demands on your schedule. And in some ways, I kind of think of myself as a paramedic that's always on call and needing to go to the next fire, the next emergency, and I need to be ready to do that. And if there's a big project that is going on in the church, it's critically important that I have a leadership team that can help support me and keep the trains going and running while we're going and putting out the fires. So I think that's absolutely important. I want to talk about some of the different, or have you talk about, Alan, some of the different roles that we need to be thinking about in recruiting. And while I just said senior pastors need the help, they actually have a pretty key role to play in recruiting not only the leadership team, but also being the one who casts vision for the church. And I want to play a little video clip for you and just hear some of your comments about the role of the senior pastor.
And our senior warden really sort of said to me, if this is something you want us to do, you got to convince us. And so that's really where I said, okay, am I convinced? And once that happened, and I was sold on it, then it was a matter of getting our leadership to buy into it. And that was really just about sharing the passion for it, what I thought it might bring to our congregation, and how that might help us continue in our mission as a church. And once that took place, people saw that excitement and they got excited about it, and it just snowballed from there.
In terms of the senior pastor, one of the things that Brian is saying there is that he had a very important job that he had to accomplish, or a key part of casting a vision. I wonder if you could speak to some of what you saw in that.
Yeah, it's been interesting, over the years, in my work with Brett Eastman at Life Together Ministries and my own consulting that I've done with churches. We've worked with churches as small as 40, 50 people, and then churches large as, big mega churches. And what we've seen is that if a person is not already connected to other members of the congregation, the reason that they're there is because of their connection with the senior pastor. I mean, people have a lot of choices of what type of church to attend, and sometimes even within the same denomination, they have a lot of choices of what church to attend. And so, people are there because they connect with the senior pastor. They like the senior pastor's style of presentation. They like his or her, jokes, if they tell jokes, but they connect with that personality. And so when the senior pastor stands up and invites them to, would you open up your heart and open up your home and lead one of these groups, and then cast the broader vision for all of this, people are going to respond to the senior pastor. And I've seen this happen over and over again, whether it be Rick Warren's or Bill Hybels or Chip Ingram or Jerry Branch, that pastors a church of 50 people in Dallas, Pennsylvania. It's worked time and time again. And Jerry actually went from having 50 people in his church to having 100 people do their small group study. And I don't know that Rick Warren's quite had those results, but don't tell him I said that.
Well, one of the things about a smaller church that I think is so powerful is it doesn't take a lot of people involved to get really huge results in terms of percentage. We were a church of 250 when we did the 40 Days of Purpose, and we asked 70 different people to host small groups. And so we had 70 small groups meeting during our 40 Days of Purpose campaign. We actually had 3 times the number of people in small groups as we did attending church on Sunday. And that's the kind of, when you have a good leadership team, you can pull those kind of things off. We had a particular member whose name was Ty, who was a retired Rear Admiral. And Ty was our campaign director and helped cast the vision with the congregation. And he was kind of an E.F. Hutton type. When Ty speaks, people listen. And it was wonderful to see as we got him in that right position, people began to really get involved and engaged and respond. And so I think the first position that I would say is of most importance is that campaign director. The senior pastor is the one who has to set the vision, but the campaign director is the one that's going to make it happen. Let me show you a little clip about one pastor who recruited his campaign director and some of the thoughts and thinking that went into that selection.
So I knew getting this started would be more than I could handle for 2 reasons. Number one, small groups is not my forte. Number 2, I'm already super busy. So I went and found somebody in our church who was a high-level performer, somebody who was passionate about small groups, somebody who had some background running small groups, and hired her to basically become the front runner of this. And so we put somebody on staff part-time to take care of that, which was recruiting and training and doing a lot of that sort of encouraging along the way, and followed the leadership manual that the Crucified Life provides for starting those small groups, and it worked really, really well.
One of the things about that's Pastor Phil Ayers, and I know a few things about his church because he's in Lake Mary here. But Phil Ayers, when he says he hired a small group coordinator for his church, what he means is that he basically traded office space that he had to bring her and consider her staff. His church is actually not a huge church. They have about 200 people that come on a weekend, and his intention was to launch 15 small groups. But as you heard him speak, what were some of the things that you picked up on that would be things that he was identifying as why that campaign director was so important?
Say, if Phil got to hire somebody, good grief, I served in a church of 6,500, and I never got to hire anybody, so I was going to be very, very jealous. But I think in that, a lot of the day-to-day detail And especially to have a detailed person that's going to follow a timeline, that's going to make sure that things happen when they happen, to kind of coordinate with the other coordinators, if you will. And again, it doesn't end up on the senior pastor's plate, because the senior pastor is already busy, especially if they're a solo pastor, but every senior pastor is busy. And so I think to have somebody that is efficient, that's capable, again, it's not, going to be forever. It's going to be for a certain season. Maybe somebody who is retired, that can run it. I mean, similar to what you had for 40 Days of Purpose, someone that is just, they can juggle a lot of things, and this is one more thing that they're not going to even break a sweat. But that's a great person to have in your corner.
One of the things that I observed about the campaign director at LifePoint, which was the video that we just saw, their campaign director was a real detailed person. And she was extremely thoughtful. And when they had their rally for all their hosts that were people that were going to host small groups at their church, she set up a meeting, and everybody had a packet that was prepared for them. There was a presentation. People had little name placards. And she had just put a lot of detail and a lot of thoughts, and was just extremely thoughtful. And I was thinking to myself, what a gift to have a person like that who can spend the time and focus on those kind of little details that really mean a lot to make something personal. And I know that everybody that was a host in that particular congregation really felt honored, and that somebody had taken the time to make sure that they had everything that they need to do what they were going to be doing. And so I was very impressed by the person that he chose, and he certainly had given some thought to who was going to be in that role as the campaign director. Let's talk about the prayer team coordinator. What do you see that role is, and why is that an important and key person in a small group ministry?
Well, I think one of the things, having been in this for a long time, is we can begin to deceive ourselves into thinking if we follow a well-executed strategy, then that's going to get us the results that we want to get. And the reality is, I mean, apart from God, we're just fooling ourselves. And so we want to see what God has accomplished. We also know that as a congregation and as individuals that are stepping forward to host a group, we're going to have a certain amount of spiritual opposition. And so we definitely need prayer covering for all of that. And even if it's just minor things, if things not working the way that they should, I have a good Presbyterian friend who refers to that as spiritual flack. We might be getting a little spiritual flack, but it's great to have that prayer team coordinator. Now, this may be somebody who currently leads a prayer ministry in your church, so you don't need to, create this competition among prayer team coordinators. If you already have somebody in that role, then maybe it's just a matter of enlisting them for this campaign, and would they apply their prayers to the campaign as well. But really, you can go through, I know with the Christian Life Trilogy, there is a campaign handbook that we put together. And I mean, they could go through page by page to the handbook and pray for everything large and small. And pray for every week. Pray for, if they have lists of names of people that are in groups, pray for the people that are in groups. But I think this would be a great thing. So if you have someone who's a heart toward prayer, I would definitely enlist them. But if you already have somebody who's leading a prayer team in your church and that's their ministry, then I would certainly tap them for this role.
Our prayer team coordinator was very thoughtful and put together essentially a team of prayer warriors who were going to pray specifically for each host. And they regularly called the hosts and said, how can I pray for you? And they were checking in with the hosts and praying for the specific small groups and challenges and that sort of thing. As the spiritual flack started to present itself, there were people there ready to be a support. And I know that was a very meaningful thing. There are a lot of creative things that churches do, prayer vigils, prayer walks, where they can walk around the campus or walk around a neighborhood and pray for the neighborhood. So there's a lot of different ways to incorporate prayer, but I think it's such a critical piece. I actually think that is one of the most important members of the team, is the person that is focused on prayer. The small group coordinator is probably the second most important person on the team. Somebody that will help be making that list of all the people that are going to be hosts of the small groups, and making sure that there's good promotions and ways of people to sign up, not only to be participants, but to be hosts. And one of the strategies that we encourage and use is to encourage people to sign up as hosts first, to host a small group rather than participants, and then have the host go out and recruit the participants. I'm going to play another video that has a little bit about recruiting that small group host and recruiting that team.
My role on the leadership committee, I was the guy in charge of the committee itself. And what we did, we kind of planned out the process of the Christian Life Trilogy and what that will look like. And part of that included recruiting host leaders. And this was something that was very important, very needed, to recruit the host leaders to open their home, to bring in people, to really show the word of a crucified life, the resurrected life, and then a spirit-filled life.
So then it was to identify the different leaders, to invite them to pray about it as well, and give them enough time to think and come back with what you hope is a positive response. I think actually some of the people that I asked were surprised that I asked them. And what we found out is that I got a number of emails and text messages from people who thanked me for having faith in them, to see in them that they had the strength and the ability to do this.
So the first person on that video was Lamar, who was our campaign director and in charge of recruiting small group hosts. And he was just somebody that was a maniac on a mission, and wanted to make sure that everybody was given the opportunity to be a host. The second in the video was Jim Servillo, who's a priest at a Church of Ascension. And I thought what he said about his, the surprise that he had, that people had, that they were asked. What were some of the things that you saw there, Alan?
Yeah, I think that this role is crucial because, if the senior pastor is a spokesperson for this and, cast the net for people to sign up to be hosts, it's the small group coordinator who is going to come in and take those hosts, give them a briefing, get the materials to them, resource them, be a resource to them, and basically do all of the groundwork related to the small groups. Some churches, I like what you were saying, Charlie, will, think about friends and family and coworkers and neighbors, who would enjoy or benefit from the study. The way we used to put it in California when I was out there was I said, if I were you, I would go ahead and invite my friends to the group. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a bunch of crazy people. Now, I live in South Carolina now, and I'm more, genteel here in the South, so I would never say something like that. But you get my point. But there are people that are having difficulty finding a group. Maybe it's the small group coordinator that would create a small group fair or some kind of a connection event where people who are prospective group members can meet the host face-to-face, sign up to be in their groups, and, if push comes to shove and somebody writes on a communication card, please help me find a group, then maybe it's this coordinator that helps them to find a group.
We just had our leadership team meeting we're about to launch the Spirit-Filled Life here at our congregation, and so one of the main things that we do in our leadership meeting is go through a list of counting how many small group hosts that we have, who are potential hosts, and making sure that we're following up on all the people that we know that have indicated some interest in hosting a group, trying to figure out what time their group's meeting. Is their group open or closed to new members? Maybe it is just a group that has just friends. And so it's a closed group, and you don't want to sign up a bunch of people in that group because they've limited it. But it's a lot of coordination, and so making sure that there's a person that is focused on that ball and small group coordinating is critically important. And I loved what Jim Servillo said, that people, when they're asked to be a host, sometimes they didn't think of that for themselves. And so a lot of times I think that small group coordinator, if you find the right person for that, can have a lot of power to speak into other people's lives and challenge them to step out in faith. And I love the way he had a gentle approach where he said, I'm going to ask you to pray about that and see if that might be something that you're called to. And of course, it may not be something, but if it is, and then they step out in faith. So what a wonderful model that Jim Servillo was modeling there. Now let's talk about that communications team coordinator for a minute. What are some things that are important about that particular position?
Yeah, this position is, again, double-checking the messaging of what's going to be said from week to week, making sure everything is following the timeline. So, what should be in the worship bulletin? Should there be a handout? Is there a video to be played during the service? What are the kinds of things in a bullet point form, some suggestions of what the pastor should say that week? Which weeks are you doing host briefings? Which weeks are you having a connection event? And then once the campaign starts, once the series starts, then this communications role turns more into collecting stories of what God's doing in these groups. And that could be anything from an online survey to making some personal phone calls to group leaders and just asking them to write down stories of what God's doing in their group.
I think all of that's excellent. I love the part about the testimonies, because when we start sharing testimonies of what the Lord is doing in the various groups, it gets energy and excitement going, and people's faith really gets stirred up. And there's a lot of great healing that can happen in different groups. We had a guy in our small group who played the guitar, but he had gone through some cancer treatments. And so he hadn't picked up the guitar since he had started his battle with cancer. And when we got our small group together and we asked a question in one of the group meetings, what is your spiritual gift? He named music as a gift. And so the next week we all asked him to bring his guitar, and he led us in some worship singing. And it's just a wonderful testimony and a little story that could be shared that just means a lot to others to hear how God's working in other people's lives. We also, one other thing I would add to your first part is the importance of that communications team coordinator to design a communications calendar so that they know what they're going to communicate and when, and have put some thought into that. It's just too important of a role to not have somebody assigned to that that's focused on it. It may be a member of a staff of a large church, or it could be somebody that is a layperson that's very gifted with the different forms of media, but it's not one to be overlooked. As Rick Warren said when he was doing his training videos, you cannot over-communicate. You cannot over-communicate. It's really true. So those are some of the roles that we want to recruit. What are some of the kinds of things that we're going to be looking for as we recruit members of the leadership team?
Yeah, I think this list, it's similar to what Bill Hybels has said for years. And if you don't like Bill Hybels, it's what I've said for years. But anyway, you want to look for people who have good character. And so in that they're on the pathway to becoming more and more Christ-like. And so it's going to be somebody who's going to be honest with people, somebody that's not going to so they're not going to sell people into something and then it turns out that it's more work than they thought it was going to be. You want people who are competent, people that will get the job done, people that have kind of a proven track record in that, and maybe that goes along with the commitment part, that they know that they're going to follow through, that when the going gets tough, the tough's going to get going. And the last one to me is highly significant, the chemistry part, because just because a person is capable or even willing, if that person continually rubs you the wrong way, or that person causes a problem in the team and just saps a lot of energy. I would almost rather go with someone who is less capable but easier to get along with. I had a guy years ago when I was building my small group team, and he actually had more small group experience than I did. But I tell you what, every time he would poke his head in my door and say, "Hey, have you got a sec?" I would just cringe on the inside, even though I was trying to smile on the outside, because I thought, oh man, now what? And so I thought, if I build the small group team and he's in that meeting, that's going to be a meeting that I am going to dread on a weekly basis. And so I passed. I didn't invite him. He didn't really understand, but then he ended up being a missionary in Central America. He ended up planting a church and doing all kinds of things. And I thought, well, you know what? Maybe if I had felt the pressure to include him in my team, it would have kept him away from all these other things that God had planned for his life.
Well, and one of the things that I've noticed, just to your point about commitment and chemistry, not everybody in the church is committed to small groups. There are a lot of people that don't enjoy being part of small groups. They prefer having classes and Sunday school and that sort of thing. And so sometimes those types of people are leaders in the church, and you naturally gravitate towards those leaders. But when you put them on a leadership team that's for small groups and they don't really believe in it and they don't really have a commitment to it, then that can kind of poison the leadership team if you're arguing about the why of doing it while you're trying. And we've actually had that experience as part of our leadership team, where I just got the wrong person. And he actually eventually came out in the meetings that, well, he just didn't believe in doing small groups. He didn't think it would work. And once he admitted that, he resigned from the group, and our meetings went a lot smoother. So having that chemistry is so important. You don't just want warm bodies. You want to find people that have the kind of qualifications that Alan's listed here, of the character and competency and so on. By the way, if you have questions as you're listening to this, you can ask a question through the chat or through the Q&A, and we can pick those up and try to answer those for you as we go along. We're almost finished. I want to spend some time on thinking about some of the benefits of building this team and doing a small group campaign.
All right, so the first benefit is, I know it's almost like a newscast, with this muting. We should go, all right, and back to you, Charlie. But anyway, one benefit is hopefully it's going to be less work for the senior pastor, in that not only you have the campaign team, but also as people are connected into groups, the level of personal care goes up. So they have a person to talk to, they have a person to pray with them, they have a person maybe even to go visit them in the hospital, even though I don't think that exempts the pastor from doing that. But it may actually take a few appointments off of the pastor's calendar, because they're feeling that relational piece that they need, and they don't necessarily need a counseling appointment. They just need somebody that would care enough and understand and help them. I think also having a team it's going to build momentum for the campaign, because the more people that you have involved in this, the larger the momentum is going to grow. So even people on the prayer team are going to know, okay, I'm praying for these specific things for the campaign, and they're going to feel positive about it because they're dedicating time in prayer. So then they're going to have good things to say to their friends and family about the campaign as well. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it engages new categories of ministry gifts. So if you don't have a small group coordinator, you have someone who has a leadership gift, then that's kind of a place where they could go. The same thing with a communications coordinator, people that have those skills that maybe they haven't found the right role in your church up to this point. Maybe this is the thing. And of course, the big thing is is to have an organized campaign without overtaxing anyone. Now, I've done campaigns. I've coached churches on doing campaigns. I think, Charlie, that you're kind of the perfect one to speak to this, because being a pastor at a church, You're not at a small church. You're not at a mega church. You have limited staff. You have limited resources. How has this team benefited you?
Well, that's absolutely. I can't do what I'm doing as a pastor without people in committees and on teams and commissions, and we have to engage the laity of our church, and they always do it better than I would ever do it. When it's my responsibility, and I'm running the organization and the group, a lot of times I feel like I don't do as good a job as when I have a key lay person and a key group of people that are committed to it. And I've also found that when other people get invested, it's contagious in the life of the church. And so this small group leadership team actually will be what catalyzes a bunch of people to get involved and be hosts of small groups. They're going to see, oh, it's not just the pastor who's saying this. It's everybody. All these leaders are doing it. I want to be a part of this. This is exciting. I want to ask a couple of questions. We've gotten some questions, Alan. One of the questions comes from Patty. She says, how do you rotate small groups, or do you rotate them? You want to tackle that one?
I think I need to understand what she means by rotate. If we're talking about people that are changing groups as they go, Patty, could you give us a little clarification there? In the question?
And I'll speak to what I understand that question well, if she wants to clarify. First of all, I think a lot of times people can get stuck in one group and they don't rotate to another group or go. The group can become almost a tight-knit group of people. And we have small groups at our church that, no lie, have been meeting for 25 years together, the same group of people, and they get together. And I couldn't stick a crowbar into that group and pry any of those people away from each other. And nor could I tell them to split up, because they would lynch me. They would literally say I'm persecuting their group. And I've been accused of that by some of the things I've tried and suggested in taking a vacation from your small group. They said, we're never going to take a vacation from our group. Well, to me, those kind of groups, you just kind of have to leave them alone if you're the pastor and say, God bless you, and trust that there will be always other people who are wanting to step up and host and to lead. And you can't get frustrated with the ones that want to stay together. But for those that do want to rotate to a different group, my suggestion is stick with a group for a series. And that's what I like about the 7-week series, the 6-week series, is that after you've been a part of a group for 6 or 7 weeks, it's a good time to switch groups or to rotate to a different host home or a different venue or try something new and rotate curriculum. So those are the kinds of things that I think about rotating. And Patty says exactly what you're addressing. So thank you, Patty, for that feedback.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what I hear you saying, Charlie, is it goes along with the words of the great theologian. Now I can't remember his name. I was going to make a joke, but now that it's departed from my mind, the great theologian Kenny Rogers, when he said, you've got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them, know when to walk away and know when to run. But yeah, you don't want your groups to become a cul-de-sac. You don't want them to become the Dead Sea, if you will. And so I would say even with long-term groups, if one thing, a couple of ways they could reach out to others. One would be that they would be open to inviting new members. I've been I started a men's group 8 years ago and was with it for 4 years, and then I had left the church that I was on staff at and then turned it over to another guy to lead. He actually has an office right across the hall from me, by the way. And so that group has continued. There's only one original member in that group, but we've had a lot of guys kind of cycle in and out over time. So one of the things is to continue to invite. The other thing is that the group would do something together to serve. So if their ministry is not to reach out and include other people, then it is to serve. And of course, the other thing with the campaign is, because the senior pastor is making a call for hosts, if somebody is not comfortable in the group they're in, there is no more noble reason to leave a group than I am going to go start a group on my own. I mean, you have to have the favor of God all over you, and also a huge sense of relief that you get out of there. So
that's right, and you build a group of people that you're more comfortable with, that you feel you resonate more with. Let me pick up a couple more questions. We've got some other questions here. I'd like to know if there is a time when a small group should be closed versus open in nature. And what I understand closed versus open is closed group means we're not accepting new participants. Open means that we're welcoming new attendees. You have a thought about that?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts, as you might imagine. The first is, sometimes there is a season where there's somebody that's going through something pretty intense in their life, one of the group members, and so if a new person came in, to have to go back and explain all of the backstory might be a little too much. So maybe you would kind of close for a season to kind of help, or if you're going through a study, like some kind of a step study or something that is really getting down to the nitty-gritty, you may not want the new person to show up that week because you're about to divulge, kind of your deepest, darkest secrets. But the other thing with a closed group, sometimes people close because they're comfortable with the people they have. They don't want to put new people in there. But I don't know that they're closed as much as they're exclusive. They still invite people, but they only invite the people they want to invite. They don't want kind of, random strangers to show up to the group.
I have seen that. I've seen both situations where people do get a little cliquish, and then there are groups that are closed because they need that intimacy in a safe place. And obviously you can make a reason for just about anything, and some of those reasons are godly and good to keep a group closed. Let me here's a question about a small church, a new church with a new pastor, where the question is, if you only have 10 to 15 people, how do you have several coordinators? And I'll tackle that one. One of the things about a small church is that if you only have a handful of people, let's say you have 25 or 30 people coming on a weekend, obviously you're not necessarily going to have a big team of people. Your team is actually going to be the host of your small groups. And so what you're going to want to do is to identify those 4, 5, 6 people within your congregation that have the gift of hospitality. And if those 4 or 5 households will reach out to the 25, all of a sudden you have just incorporated your entire congregation into a small group ministry and gotten them into homes talking about the faith in an intimate way. So, you feel the necessity of these teams. Now you can give those different, say you recruited 4 hosts to be your leadership team, assign communication to one of them, assign prayer to one another, assign organization to another one, and utilize the gifts of the people that you have, and make sure that you're working together as a group. We'll keep asking questions, but I want to get this in. So my commercial before people we start losing some folks. But what I want to encourage you to do is check out the Christian Life Trilogy, which is a small group curriculum that I wrote and designed to be used during the heart of the Christian year, during Lent, Easter season, and Pentecost season. It's a great launch time to launch at Lent, because people are looking for things to do as a preparation for Easter. And so this is a 7-week, the Crucified Life is a 7-week series that you can launch in time for Easter. Easter comes around pretty early this next year. So you actually would want to be building your leadership team in this year, in 2015. We will actually begin to build a leadership team for the Lenten campaign in November and December, so that we can take advantage of the Christmas Eve services to invite people to be participating in this, and make sure that we have ourselves organized, because January is going to come hard and fast. So you want to make sure you've done a lot of your spade work prior to the year turning. So this leadership team and all the things that we're talking about, if you're going to do the crucified life, you're going to want to be recruiting that leadership team in October, November, December months, and make sure that you're planned and well organized in time to launch effectively in the 1st of February for Lent. So also, I would encourage people, if you're interested in the Christian Life Trilogy, to order the campaign kit. On the website, ChristianLifeTrilogy.com, I believe the campaign kit's $199, but if you use this coupon code for attending the webinar, Lent16 will take $50 off the campaign kit. So I hope that you'll at least take a look at that. There's a way to preview the materials and see the first chapters and sessions of them. It's a daily devotion, a small group study guide, and teaching video. And we continually put other resources up there for churches to really make it a successful thing. This past Lent, we had 40 congregations doing the Christian Life Trilogy, and next year we're hoping to triple that. So I hope your congregation will consider that. Let me ask another question. Do you feel there's a need for co-hosts, maybe to prepare future hosts or leaders? What do you think, Alan?
I think it's a good idea to have a co-host anyway, because you never know when you might be called out of town, or you're sick or something like that. But at least someone to kind of take part of the leadership, take some of the pressure off, so that one person is not having to do all of it themselves. Now, I would even take it one step further, and I would get all of the group involved. Have somebody different bring refreshments, meet at different people's houses, even ask different people to lead the discussion for a week or lead a prayer time. And that way you're kind of training all of them, but definitely have a partner in all of this. I always jokingly say for groups that need childcare that if the host is sweating the childcare, I said, well, this is what you do. You recruit your host. You say, would you like to be my co-host? And they say, sure, I'd love to be your co-host. How can I help you? And you say, well, as my co-host, I want you to be in charge of childcare, and then it's not your problem anymore. So you've already solved that. So a co-host is a great thing to have. But no, it's always good to have a partner in ministry. You see a lot of ministry partners in the New Testament, and so it's always good to have that partner, but somebody that you're training and developing, someone that could do it maybe 30% as well as you, and the truth is they could do it 60% as well.
I can speak from personal experience on that. My small group, we have some people in there that are excellent facilitators, and I am actually more of a teacher, so I talk too much. And these people know how to ask questions and to be quiet and to really be curious. And so while we opened up our home and we were the host, we were not necessarily the best qualified to be the facilitators in our group. And when some of these other people facilitate it, the discussions go a lot better. And we also have a person in our group that is a master chef. And so when she brings the snacks, it's really awesome. So I love seeing all the different spiritual gifts and talents that come out with a small group, and it's neat because a lot of these gifts and talents do not get to be showcased on the large church scale. If you have several hundred people on a weekend, you don't get to see all the musical gifts. You don't get to see all the hospitality gifts and the food gifts. So those are wonderful to have showcased in a small group. One of the questions that we got from your experience, Alan, you've talked to a lot of churches. Do you find that churches that utilize small groups experience more commitment in terms of giving?
We actually have found that I'm in the process of writing a book, and in both transformational groups that was created by Ed Stetzer and Eric Geiger, as well as a study that Robert Wuthnow did years ago, found that people that are committed to groups tend to give more than people that aren't committed to groups. And I don't have the percentages right off the top of my head, but we are working with a church in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. And what they've seen comparing the first 6 months of 2014 with the same period in 2015 is that they have increased their Sunday morning attendance by 7.5%, and their overall giving has increased by 7%. And the only difference between the 2 years was that they did a series in the new year, and then they did a series after Easter. So kind of the same timing of having a Lenten series and having that Easter series, and it kept people more engaged. They were inviting their friends, and there were a lot of great things with that. I don't want to make too much out of that, but that has been what I've seen from both the research side as well as the experiences of some of the churches we've worked with.
Well, and there's also the kind of things that are really unmeasurable. I love the Grinch That Stole Christmas, and they have the X-ray machine that can X-ray a person's heart. And they could see that the Grinch had a group that is 3 sizes too small or something like that. It's the heart change that, to me, is the most important thing. And to see people develop intimate relationships and friendships, not only with each other, but with the Lord, to me, that's what gets me very excited as a pastor. I love seeing people come to church and to give more. But to me, those are lagging indicators of what God's doing in their hearts, and how the Lord is working inside of them, which is something you can't really measure or see. One of the neat things with the Christian Life Trilogy that happened that was sort of an unforeseen benefit, but it was really great when it happened, is our Holy Week attendances went up by 15% after we did the Christian Life Trilogy, where people just very much got engaged in Holy Week and started taking Good Friday service a lot more seriously. We made Good Friday the culmination of the crucified life, where we put a big cross up in front of the church and invited people to lay at the foot of the cross anything that had been stirred up in the crucified life. And it was powerful to watch. I had tears in my eyes on more than one occasion. I was watching the people's just the emotion and what God was doing in their lives through that experience. And then after Easter, we held a healing service, and again, just had tremendous participation, people coming up for prayer ministry to be healed, and powerful, powerful things. But it was the small groups that had prepared and tilled that soil and really gotten people ready for that. Well, I don't see any other questions. I'll give it we have 5 more minutes. Is there any questions that you have, Alan, or something that we haven't covered that you would want to say?
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say is, we did the video for the teaching for the trilogy just a little over a year ago at the Episcopal Cathedral there in Orlando. And one of the things I noticed, because I helped to produce the series, is that our crew that was there behind the cameras and helping to direct and everything else would come to me and talk about the teaching that they were experiencing. Now, granted, they were experiencing all 20 sessions in 2 days that we shot it. And so, Charlie, kudos to you for, I don't know that I could do that, but they came to me and they expressed how they were moved by the teaching during the process of shooting the video for this curriculum. And we've been on a lot of different video shoots. I won't list them off or name names, but I haven't seen quite that reaction from other places that we've been. And so it was a really remarkable thing to experience, because these weren't people that are like out on the loony fringe and, going to jump up and down and, all that stuff. I mean, these were solid people that, they were, if anything, they were a little more jaded because they've seen it all. And so I thought that was a really cool experience just in the production of this.
Well, it's been a God thing. The whole project has been a God thing. The curriculum was produced in about 1.5 years, and it was a blessing to be a part of it and to be the one that God would put on my heart and others to help make it happen. And it's been very much a team effort. But to me, the credit goes to the Lord, and I'm eager to see what He'll do using these materials in the life of the churches, and want to hear the stories. Are there any other questions? I don't see any. Here's a comment. Thank you for your time. I've organized many events, but a Bible study is a new endeavor. And I love that. I love that there are people that are taking the risk and stepping out in faith. And if this is a new ideas to you and some things that maybe you could learn from this to take that faith, go for it. And I really hope that the Lord will bless you for your risk and the faith. But one of the things I would encourage you, for doing as a new thing, people like to do something new. And so if you bring a new thing to your congregation, the excitement and the enthusiasm for that will be contagious. And so, really step out in faith. And you'll make mistakes. We all do. But I still make a lot of mistakes. But that is it's a real blessing to see God at work through people getting invested in one another's lives and learning about the faith together. Any other thoughts you had, Alan?
Well, I would say for people that are, we still have 13 folks that are sitting on here. Appreciate your time, but I would say if you're, sitting on the fence, not sure if this is the way you should go, this is certainly worth a try. And you're going to do something for Lent this next season anyway. And whether that's going to be putting a little more into your midweek, you can certainly use Crucified Life there, maybe with table groups. Maybe small groups are new to your church. And so I would encourage you, at least in some way, do some kind of a pilot and, get a half a dozen people that you trust and ask them if they would lead a group and have people sign up for those groups. But I think this is it's something to try. If it's new for you, then, try it at a level that's comfortable to you. I think what I found in working with pastors and church leaders is if you take a bigger risk than what you're ready for, then secretly you kind of wish your initiative would fail, because if it succeeds, then it's like essentially your worst nightmare. But, even if you start small and take small steps, but there may be others of you that you see, people are not going to Sunday school. People are not engaging in other traditional kind of discipleship programs as it is. They're coming to the worship service. Maybe they're not coming as regularly as they should, but then they're doing very little else. This is a great opportunity for them to get together with their friends and to do a study and to take their weekend into the week. Do something, one step further for their own spiritual growth and make that investment of time. Because a lot of churches, and we work with all kinds of different churches, a lot of weight's been put into the weekend service, and a lot of churches are doing very little else, even some very large contemporary churches in the country. And people are not growing. And if they're not growing in their faith, they're not giving, they're not serving, they're not reaching other people. And I'm preaching now, Charlie, I apologize. But I guess, go ahead.
Well, I just want to, I know we're getting close to the end of the hour. One of the things that I want to say is we have a team of people with the Christian Life Trilogy, and this is all produced by a nonprofit publishing company called Bible Study Media, and we're here to support you through this all the way. And so I'm available to you. Alan White's available to you as we're building up towards the Lenten season. And if you have questions or you need a little encouragement or anything that we can do to make things easier or better, please reach out to us, and we'll try to figure it out together. But we want to be a support to the church, because it goes back to what I shared at the beginning. My vision and hope is that the church would be renewed in our time and in our day, and that we would see us getting back to the main thing, which is the heart of the gospel, the crucified, resurrected, and spirit-filled life. So I do hope that today is a blessing to you, and I'm so grateful that you were part of this conference call. And so we'll say goodbye for now, but I hope that you'll engage on future webinars, and we'll be doing other different topics. Alan will be back, and so I hope you'll join us for some of those other topics. And do check out the ChristianLifeTrilogy.com as you have time. So thank you. Thank you, Alan.
See you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Charlie Holt, and I'm the pastor of St. Peter's Church and the author of the Christian Life Trilogy. Over the years, I've had a hunger to see solid small group materials developed in and around the core faith of our church, found in the gospel of Jesus Christ. The Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, "For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that He was buried, and that He was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures." The Christian Life Trilogy seeks to focus on the things of first importance: the crucified life, the resurrected life, and the Spirit-filled life. To explore what it means to walk the way of the cross, to be raised with Christ in newness of life, and to be filled with all the fullness of the Spirit of God. As a pastor, every year I'm asking myself, what am I going to do for Lent this year? Listen to the impact the Crucified Life materials have had on those who participated during Lent.
I think very often you look at the empty cross. You look at just the season of Lent. Here we go, another year. This gave people an opportunity to go deeper and to really find out, what does this mean? How does this apply to my life? What does this mean for my depth of spirituality?
To think of what Jesus was going through, it just made the Easter experience, the entire Easter experience, the most profound one I've ever had.
The average Christian, when he thinks about the last 7 phrases that Christ said on the cross, may take them at face value. But when we find out from this session on the crucified life, the meaning behind those words and how it applies to us, it definitely matures you as a Christian in a very strong way. I look at things totally different than I did before.
I think the crucified life really went to a place in people's lives where they're longing, but maybe don't even know they need. I've heard over and over again how God's touched people's lives and brought them to a deeper level of faith and intimacy with Christ through this Crucified Life series, and how our church as a community went through it together.
What you have just heard is the transformational power of the first study in the trilogy, The Crucified Life, 7 Words from the Cross. The entire Christian Life Trilogy is a 20-week journey into the heart of the gospel and the heart of the Christian life. These 3 studies are not only deeply theological in their intent and purpose, but also deeply practical as they call us to be transformed into the image and likeness of God through His Son, Jesus Christ.
Within just a couple of weeks, people were really sharing some of their biggest challenges, some of the toughest things that they're going through, and then watching other people in my group literally just wrap their arms around them, pray for them, and get involved in their lives. And that stuck and still sticks to this day. So that was, I think, what we needed, and that's what God did through the material.
God is calling the church back to His heart, and you're invited to be a part of that by participating in the Christian Life Trilogy church-wide campaign. I hope this resource will bring tremendous renewal to the church, your congregation, and to you personally. My prayer is that the Lord will bring all of our hearts back to the things of first importance as we walk the way of the crucified life, the resurrected life, and the Spirit-filled life.